Good afternoon. We are going to read another, actually we're going to finish the book today. Wayside School is Falling Down by Sachar. We're going to read chapter 29, which sums up a lot of little things that are kind of implied or left unended as we go on. There will be a few little things in there that you go, oh, now I get it, from earlier chapters. And then after that, I'll finish up chapter 30. The other books should be here tomorrow. At least that's what Amazon said. So then hopefully after we finish up this one, we'll read Wayside School Gets a Little Stranger. And as somebody said, how can it get any stranger? But you'll see. This is chapter 29, The Lost Ear. Mrs. Jules was teaching the class about about mammals. All mammals have hair, she said. Bibi raised her hand. Is my father a mammal? She asked. Yes, all people are mammals, said Mrs. Jules. But my father doesn't have any hair, said Bibi. He's bald. Everybody laughed. Benjamin stared down at the top of his desk. He was very determined. Mrs. Jules would be handing out report cards at the end of the week. He had to tell her his real name before then. He raised his hand, but Mac also had his hand raised. Yes, Mac, said Mrs. Jules. I heard about a man who was getting his hair cut, said Mac, and the barber cut off one of the man's ears. See, the man had really long hair. I think he was a hippie, so the barber couldn't see the ear until it fell on the floor. Thank you, Mac, said Mrs. Jules. That was a very interesting story. I'm not finished, said Mac. When the barber saw the ear on the floor, he said, Is this your ear on the floor? And the hippie said, What? I can't hear you. So the barber showed him the ear and then called the ambulance to take the hippie to the hospital. Were they able to put the ear back on? Asked Todd. Well, see, said Mac, the doctors were all set to sew it on his head. But they were in the operating room and everything. But suddenly, they couldn't find the ear. Man, they looked everywhere for it. Did they look under the operating table? Asked Joy. Yep, said Mac. It wasn't there. How about in the bathroom? Asked Eric Bacon. Maybe they lost it when they washed their hands. They looked, but it wasn't there, said Mac. Did they leave it at the barber shop? Asked Jenny. Nope. Did they ever find it? Asked Allison. Yes, said Mac. But you'll never guess where. In the refrigerator, said Mrs. Jules. No, how would it get in there? Asked Mac. Well, we really need to get back to mammals, said Mrs. Jules. Yes, Mark? Benjamin lowered his hand. My name's not Mark, he said. My name is really Benjamin. Benjamin Nushmut. And I came here from Hempleton, not Macedonia. Fine, said Mrs. Jules, but we were talking about mammals. Now, the whale is the largest mammal. Even though it lives in the ocean, it's still a mammal, not a fish. Do whales have hair? Asked John. Yes, said Mrs. Jules. Dana laughed. A whale with pigtails, she exclaimed. Boy, I'd love to pull one of those, said Paul. Benjamin couldn't believe it. Didn't you hear what I just said? He asked. Yes, Benjamin, said Mrs. Jules. Well, don't you think I'm strange? Asked Benjamin. All the time you've been calling me by the wrong name, and I never told you. Don't you think I'm crazy? No, said Mrs. Jules. Benjamin was getting upset. Well, don't you think it's a stupid name? Benjamin Nushmut? He looked around at his classmates. Doesn't anyone think I'm weird? No, you're not weird, said Sherry. I'll tell you what's weird. What's weird is bringing a hobo to school for show and tell. I'm the one who's weird. That's not weird, said Bibi. What's weird is telling everyone you have a brother when you don't. I'm the weirdo. You call that weird? Exclaimed Stephen. I'm weird. Who else would choke himself just to look nice? That's not weird, said Jenny. That's normal. Try reading a story backwards. That's weird. I'm the weird one in this class. That's a laugh, said Rondi. If you're so weird, then how come you never asked Lewis to kick you in the teeth? I'm the one who's crazy. No, that's not crazy, said Todd. I'll tell you what's crazy. Crazy is that we all go to school on the 30th floor and the bathrooms are way down on the 1st. Everyone agreed with that, even Mrs. Jules. Benjamin shook his head. What a bunch of weirdos, he thought. Then he smiled. He felt proud to be in a class where nobody was strange because nobody was normal. Oh, "This must be your lunch," said Mrs. Jewls. She gave Benjamin the white paper sack that had been sitting on her desk since Benjamin's first day of school. Allison headed down the stairs. "Mark!" she exclaimed. "Hi, Allison," said Mark Miller. "Long time no see." He carried a white paper sack, just like Benjamin's. Allison was afraid she was back on the 19th story. "Don't worry," said Mark. "Suddenly, everybody realized my name was Mark Miller, not Benjamin Nushmutt, and then Mrs. Arves gave me this bag and told me to take it to the hospital." "Is it your lunch?" asked Allison. "Look inside," said Mark. He handed her a bag. Allison looked inside. It was an ear. Allison's eyes lit up. "Oh, now I get it," she exclaimed. "I understand everything. There's no Miss Arves. See? Mac was talking about the ear, then Benjamin Nushmutt, said his name wasn't Mark Miller, so that means you—" "What?" asked Mark. Suddenly, Allison looked confused. "Never mind," she mumbled. Just for a second, Allison had understood everything, but then she lost it. All right. I hope you liked that one. I like that one a lot, with the story about the ear and the lunch that Lewis brought up the first day that Mark Miller was there, that Benjamin Nushmutt was there, that they thought was Mark Miller, and how the real Mark Miller was trapped in the 19th story with Mrs. Arves because they got his name wrong and all that. So I thought that was kind of fun the way they all ended up kind of tying up some things back together. So we'll read chapter 30. Wayside School is falling down in just a moment.